Hi and welcome to For Many People's Strength, the podcast that covers Saskatchewan current events and politics. My name is Cory and my pronouns are he and him.
And my name is David and my pronouns are they and them or he and him. And
I guess for regular listeners, you know who we are, but for people who are new to the show, I'm an anarchist. I work in the oil field, and David is a financial guy, financial advisor.
Yeah.
And and a progressive.
I never know what to. Yeah, progressive, liberal. Sometimes I get called a centrist. Sometimes I get called a dirty leftist. I've been called a communist, a socialist.
Dirty pinko scum.
But like on the other side, I'm also called like no different from a right-wing conservative. So I seem to piss off people across the spectrum. So, like, it's, I fall in a bunch of different niches. I try to remain consistent within my views, but apparently that doesn't work so well, so.
Well, it is hard as a human being to be consistent 100% of the time.
That is also very true, so I'll own that, I guess.
I wanted to just do a quick intro, and we might have to do that regularly because it occurs to me that people might not know who we are. This is their first
totally
time
fair.
coming.
That is absolutely fair. We shouldn't always. We should be optimistic enough to assume that we are getting some new listeners each time.
We're attracting new people. We're not just getting the same all the time. Yeah.
Well, no, it's interesting because like you and I were talking, we're getting some like guest hosts or guests on in some future episodes, which is exciting. But you know, talking about how when we first started this, there was a dearth of left-wing commentary on Saskatchewan politics. Like, plenty from the right. You had your Gormleys and your Murray Woods and your, lots and lots on the right talking about politics. Maybe even some that some might consider centrist.
Sure.
But, like, outside of the Prairie Dog, which is, like, it's a newspaper, not actually... Like,
right, yeah.
Visual or audio medium, wasn't a lot. And there's been an explosion of it in the last year, so I think we jumped in on a wave.
Yeah,
I'll pretend we were at the beginning of the wave. We may very well have been late to the party as well. Who knows? But I'm happy. I'm happy. There's a lot more people out there talking about what's going on in the province and talking about it from an angle that didn't get talked about as much in the past. So
yeah, I sometimes wonder if we can maybe thank Scott Moe's awful handling of the pandemic for bringing up more voices who are critical. So
yeah, well, and I think one of the things I found interesting, I wonder how much the impact of municipal politics had, because you and I both really, like, I'm gonna say me especially, but like you and I both really were interested in a lot of the municipal stories when this started, because there wasn't a lot of coverage. We talked about how, you know, unlike a lot of like big cities like your Torontos or your Edmontons, Vancouvers, things like that, like where city council actually gets media coverage.
Right.
Here, even like Saskatoon and Regina, you want to find out what's going on in City Hall, there's pretty limited.
Not a lot, yeah.
Yeah. And like, I know Paul Duchesne does an amazing job covering Regina City Hall. And like, I got to assume he's been doing it for a while, but I only started really hearing about him right when you and I started doing this podcast. So maybe he'd been doing it for years, and I just wasn't aware of it. I found it when I started going looking for more things, right?
Yeah.
But
thankless
no, it's
job
exciting.
That he does.
It's a very thankless job that he does. Well, I officially thanking him.
Yes, that's right.
Right here.
That's right.
You heard it here first, folks. We are thanking Paul Duchesne. But and like. I've known Paul longer than that. Like he interviewed me years and years ago, a couple occasions actually, and talked him out of doing a story once. That's a long story, but it's not that long, but it's off topic. But no, it's great that we're having sort of more of it in the public eye. I love the fact that I can go onto TikTok now and like have TikToks about Saskatchewan politics show up on my For You page. That's fun.
Yeah. Now I just got to get the rest of the left podcast sphere talking about Saskatchewan a little bit more.
Fair.
So
well, and we are a hotbed of left-wing politics. Like historically,
Yep.
we talk about healthcare in Canada. The two main driving birthplaces of socialized medicine in North America were Quebec and Saskatchewan.
yeah,
Quebec had it slightly earlier than we did. The
but
Quiet
they didn't have
Revolution
Tommy
beat
Douglas. So.
Yeah, right. They had the Quiet Revolution slightly before we had Tommy Douglas.
Yeah.
Around the same time. We can call it a tie so that people don't get mad at us. Left-wingers get mad when I insult Tommy Douglas. So
Yeah.
it's not an insult, but so we should probably get on to news stories rather than waxing philosophical about
Patting ourselves on the back.
no patting. I can't reach that far. I'm old and out of shape. I can't reach my back to pat it. So
Yeah, that's right. Sask budget hints at provincial government's proposed carbon tax revenue strategy. Province proposes taking control of revenue distribution and splitting between consumers and industry. This article, Scott Moe is kind of talking about how the Saskatchewan government wants to be the ones to control the money that is taken in from the carbon tax. They, I guess, don't like the way the federal government is doing it. They probably could have had something, 2 years ago.
Oh yeah. Like what they're asking for now, had they asked for 2, 3, 4 years ago, almost certainly would have been a yes.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. I don't think anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, is shocked by that. Yeah.
They were basically not asking for no carbon tax and thought that it was just politics is why it got rejected by the federal government.
Yeah.
But now they're actually doing something kind of normal.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how the federal government reacts to it. And is it where's the line between punishing and because I don't think that's the right. Much as I don't like Scott Moe, I don't want to see the federal government punish provincial governments for, what have you. At the same time, I don't know. Again, anyone who's watched the show knows I think in bizarre metaphors most of the time. So I'm reading this, and it kind of reminds me of, with your kids, you kind of give them a couple options, and if they have a giant temper tantrum over
then
things,
they get nothing.
yeah, and I didn't get nothing, but it's you can have some control, you can have some say over things. I think you're old enough to be in charge of your own what have you. Right. I'm not going to have to supervise, and then that is rejected. It's right. No, I refuse to do that. Yeah. Okay, well, now we have to step in, and the grown-ups have to actually step in and be in charge of things for a bit. Yeah. And then there's that. Like clockwork, backpedaling of no. Then I'll be responsible. No, you said you wouldn't. We said you could be. If you turned off the screens at 9:00, you could manage your quiet time from 9 till 10, and then bedtime at 10. And then we came upstairs at 9:45, and the screens were still on. So now you can't be in charge of that anymore. We let you have that option. We said, you can manage your own bedtime routines and. Now we have to come in and make sure you brush your teeth and make sure you turn your screens off and
Yep.
And I don't like the idea of federal governments being patronizing. I don't like the idea of governments being patronizing in general.
Right. Yeah. But
also we have a provincial government that's proven it kind of does need some supervision sometimes. Yeah. So
they do like their temper tantrums.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I kind of do think that the whole point was that the provinces would be in control of the revenues from the carbon tax. And so that's kind of, if we're going with the initial plan, then this is how it'll go. But it's interesting to see it'll be interesting to see what the Liberal government says.
Yeah. No, you're right. But also, I think you'd see a lot more, if this is what the provincial government actually wanted, and it wasn't just doing a stunt, and wasn't just trying to make the federal government look bad, it would actually release a plan. Because what you have is the Scott Moe saying, "Oh, well, we'll tell you what our plan is going to be after the federal government lets us know if we're allowed to do it or not." Like, that's not how that works.
You could, yeah.
Sure, he talks about that a little bit in the article, and it sort of goes into this sort of weird, like, putting the cart before the horse. Like, we're only going to tell you what we're going to do with this money after we've been told we're allowed to do it. Like, again, maybe 4 years ago, you could have done that, and you would have had the good faith of the federal government going, okay, you know what, we'll give you a shot, and if it turns out you're, doing it irresponsibly, we can always step in and make changes. But we're now several years into this, like. I get that the carbon tax, one of the ideas of it being revenue neutral is that it goes back to industry as well. But how it goes back to industry matters. And if all you're doing is just giving all of the money back to exactly the people you took it from, or worse, turning around and just plain giving it back to the fossil fuel industry, which I can absolutely see Scott Moe doing and the Sask Party doing. Like, we've carbon taxed individual consumers, and we will give this money back to the oil sands. Yeah. And not a single drop of it goes to clean energy or clean electricity generation or
and
other
we already
carbon
know,
capture. Like,
we already know the Sask Party government is anti-electric car. Mm-hmm. So would it surprise us if they were doing programs that said no electric cars?
Right. And again, though, it just comes down to. At a certain point, you lose trust. You lose the ability to be the ones to say, no, we want to be in charge of how this gets spent. So we'll see, though. I'd like to say I'm still holding out hope that the Sask Party can be grown-ups.
Speaking of Sask Party being grown-ups, they have a record high $6.8 billion for healthcare in the new budget. Mm-hmm. And $95 million of that is ongoing for pandemic response, and $21.6 million for reducing surgical wait lists, and a bunch of new ICU beds. I think this makes sense to me. Like, it should have gone up. Maybe it should have even gone up more. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm glad they're spending more money on healthcare.
Yeah.
40% of the budget is dedicated just to healthcare, so that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good thing. It's an increase of $288 million. So again, that is a substantial increase. That's not nothing. Yeah. I'd have to do the math on it. I don't know if it actually does keep pace with inflation.
That's hard to say, I guess.
Again, inflation is. I've talked about this before. Inflation is a wonky statistic. Yeah. So it's not just one statistic, and I don't know specifics around inflation within the healthcare field. Right. Bringing in more healthcare workers from the Philippines. We're again continuing to fund pandemic response. The idea of trying to get wait times back to pre-pandemic levels by 2025. Again, that seems like a long time, and wait times were also relatively high before the pandemic. Yeah. So trying to get back to 2019 levels by 2025,
it seems like
I was gonna say, it seems like the pandemic might not even be over. It almost seems, based on that type of approach.
Well, that can't be right.
We might still be in a pandemic, but that can't be right.
That can't be right. That's not how that works.
What?
They said it's over, therefore it's over. So.
And again, they want their cake and eat it too, right? It's you can't say, "Oh, the pandemic's over. We're fine. We just need to move on with our lives." Oh, but we can't actually go back to providing the same level of quality healthcare that we had back in 2019 because we have this pandemic to deal with.
Yeah.
You can't use it as the excuse for why you're not delivering quality healthcare to the province while saying it's not actually a big deal.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't think either of us are shocked by
No.
that.
No.
That it's going to take them 3 years. And like, again, going back to 2019 levels is also not the best goal. We're still dealing with getting back to wait times that are worse than most other provinces. And in a lot of cases, getting back to wait times that were worse than they were when the NDP was in charge. Like, the Sask Party brings up long wait times under the NDP government, but never talks about the fact that wait times under their government, on average, is worse. So
Yeah.
it's
Well, they can't do that.
no, that's fair. You're not going to bring up your own losses.
Yeah, that's right.
You're right. Like that, most people don't bring up where they suck. But
Yeah. I know those times suck, but we suck worse.
yeah. I guess most people, though, don't bring up,
Well, that's true.
like, don't bring up the topic in general, though, when they're bad. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It would be like,
You just
if someone
avoid it.
cheated on their spouse 4 times, like, maybe don't then turn around to their spouse and be like, oh, man, our neighbor cheated on his wife. What an asshole. Like, that's, don't do that.
Yeah, that's right.
So
That
anyway.
seems like a bad move.
I guess if you've got people convinced, though, that you're not, like, I don't know, if you've gaslit them into thinking you didn't do the bad thing, whether it's you've got them gaslit into thinking you didn't cheat, or gaslit into thinking you've been doing better at healthcare than the other guys did,
Yeah.
maybe you can
Maybe. Yeah.
get away
Maybe
with
you
it.
can bring it up whenever you want. just ignore the reality of your own situation. The Sask budget slashes $2 billion from the deficit. Adds a PST onto a variety of services, mostly entertainment related. Yeah. So there's a few things. I know the PST is a big deal. There's extra charges on cigarettes and tobacco products, but also revenues are higher than they anticipated. So
Yeah, sales taxes tend to be fairly regressive, so, like,
yeah.
but, yeah, again, the deficit thing, like, again, the conservatives keep going, like, life under the leftists would be like this, and then describe what life is like under conservatives. Like, conservatives make a big deal about how under left-wing governments we'd have huge soaring deficits, but then they get into office and run huge soaring deficits. And, like, again, in Saskatchewan, a point that I don't think can be emphasized enough, when the Sask Party took over, we had a surplus budget with a giant rainy day fund that got blown during sunny days.
Yes, that's right.
Right? Like, again, to be super clear, the rainy day budget the NDP created did not get blown during a rainy day. It got blown during sunny days.
When we were in an economic boom.
Yes. The exact wrong time to spend that money. And so, yeah, like, again, I don't think a lot of economists, other than the most extreme right-wing ones, would be bothered by running a deficit during the pandemic. Like, I think if you're ever going to have a deficit, the last 2 years actually does make a fair bit of sense to be running a deficit. So I'm not criticizing the Sask Party for having run a deficit during the last couple years. I am criticizing them for having entered into a deficit during boom times, it getting worse leading into the pandemic, and then continuing to get worse still when the pandemic hit, right? Like, again, it's...
We should have had a rainy day fund.
We should have had a rainy day fund.
That could help fund this stuff.
We should have acknowledged that if you're spending more than you're taking in, realistically, that is still a deficit, and pretending that dipping into your rainy day fund to quote-unquote balance the budget is still a frickin' deficit. Because that is what we did for a good chunk of the Sask Party's balanced budgets.
Yeah.
Like, right. We were selling assets, we were dipping into reserve funds. Like, regular people don't get to count that as
balanced budget,
as a positive, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I take 2 or 3 years where I do RSP withdrawals in order to pay off my credit card bills, like, sometimes people have to do that. And again, not criticizing it as a overall thing that sometimes has to happen, either at the personal level or the government level, but just acknowledge that's what you're doing and don't do it in the times when you have soaring revenues or should be having soaring revenues.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
yep. So
I guess my first rant of the day. We'll see how many more I can squeeze in.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I don't know if there's much else to say about this particular article. There's the average family can expect to pay $13 more per year in education taxes. PST is on sporting events, concerts, museums, movies, and gym memberships.
The one thing that I found, it wasn't in this article. I can't even remember who it was. It was a political writer who's normally pretty low key, but losing his mind over the fact that Rough Rider tickets are going to be taxed.
Oh, really?
His projection was that this is going to absolutely alienate the Sask Party base, and the Sask Party base is going to have a revolt over the fact that there is now PST on Rough Rider tickets. And I'm like, I kind of get the symbolism of it. Like the symbolism of taxing the Rough Rider tickets. I get it. At the same time, I don't think as many people actually go to Rough Rider games as he thinks. Because again, the stadium's only so big.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're not cheap. Like I do go. I don't have season tickets. I'll go from time to time. Right. But yeah, I don't know how much of the Sask Party base is actually going to be alienated over taxing Rough Rider tickets.
I suspect that this is not something I'm going to hear about at work. No. A lot of the guys at work, they're Rider fans. They go to games when they can, but this is not a thing that's going to stop them from going. Yeah. And I doubt I'm even going to hear about it. I bet you if the federal government increased the GST on Rough Rider tickets by 1%, they would lose their mind over it. Yes.
I think partisanship is enough to override what they're actually bothered by.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Do we want to touch on one more article about the budget?
Yeah, this one, it's from the...
It's from the Federation of Labor.
Federation of Labor.
We will acknowledge that this is as biased on the left that, certain right-wing sources are on the right.
Sure, yeah. They definitely
we'll acknowledge it. Yeah, definitely. Definitely slant. But it gives us an insight into how this is seen from a certain constituency and sort of what the concerns are.
And they bring up many workers, especially those who are making minimum wage, one of the lowest in Canada, which always has to be emphasized, are having trouble making ends meet, and this will cost them more money. Yeah. So a one-time $100 rebate on car insurance doesn't come close to what workers need. No. Well, that's fair.
And again, they comment on we're still looking at issues around paid sick leave. And it'll be interesting, right? Because you now get, you'll have, we already do have a sort of a two-tier system as far as workers' rights, because people in federally regulated industries are going to be impacted by some of the changes that are going to happen at the federal level around things like sick leave. With this new agreement between the Liberals and the NDP federally. So anyone in a federally regulated industry in the province is going to have certain levels of paid sick leave that's guaranteed to them. But if you're provincially regulated, you won't.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's still a major problem, right? I know people are still getting COVID and they're out from work for weeks sometimes, and a little bit of help from our provincial government would be great. So we're not seeing that. Saskatoon Just Transition Panel explores link between climate change and the workforce. This is a mostly an article about how Saskatoon is trying to actually address climate change on a municipal level, but also without alienating the workforce. Because often people feel very attacked by climate change action. But I'm not entirely sure how much the municipal government can do in this case, because I guess it's a balancing act no matter where you are, what level of government it's at, right?
Yeah. you're right. Like the smaller, like a lot of these things need to be done at larger levels. And again, it is tough to compete in the ecologically friendly industries when the ecologically harmful industries continue to get massive subsidies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, this isn't even a case of governments aren't doing enough to help. It's we still have governments actively harming. So it's great when levels of government at any level are still trying to help, are actually trying to do what's needed.
Yeah, and I mean, this reminds, like, I don't know if we have anything in it in the articles, but Regina is recently doing like their kind of like climate action or environmental action, green stuff. And it's nice to see, at least on some level, the government gives a shit, right? Like,
well, and I think you're going to see as industries change, and I think we need to acknowledge that it's inevitable that industries will change. Because one way or another, what we're doing now isn't sustainable.
Right.
So either we're going to have some sort of horrific catastrophe to deal with, or we're going to transition.
Yeah.
One way or another, 40 years from now, you're assuming that we stay with a capitalist system, like assuming the economic system doesn't get overhauled. And I think if the economic system gets overhauled, especially in ways that I would like, or even more so in ways that you would like, we enter a bunch of other issues. But even assuming we keep the same economic system we're in now, the money to be made is going to be in wind and solar and in electric cars and environmentally sustainable methods of allowing people to have the quality of lifestyle they have today. Yeah. So if you can get in now, like, you're on the ground floor, right? Like it's like, building a car factory in the early 1900s. Like, if you're waiting till the 50s to do it, that's fine. But if you get started in the early 1900s and build up the infrastructure, then you're really, really well situated for when the boom in those industries happen. So I think from an economic standpoint, and this is sort of the angle I'll often take on these stories, is, okay, take the our side, your side politics out of it, even take the moral and philosophical aspects out of it, just from a purely dollars and cents point. Even if you're thinking selfishly, let's be a part of the world that is good at things that are about to become really, really profitable in the next few decades.
Sounds like a financial advisor.
That's me. Also, as we bring up the headline, I think this speaks to our desire to maybe shift away from the leader post. Yeah. The subtitle, the amount of energy it will hold can only power 20,000 homes.
only 20,000.
No, for an hour, right? Like, so still. But, like, it's going to be receiving energy, too. Like, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a very silly subtitle.
Yeah.
New battery storage facility, another step in SaskPower's net zero goals. 20,000 homes seems good to me. I'm happy with that.
Yeah. And I don't know if you know this, batteries are scalable. Like, I'm sure that came as a shock to you.
Yes.
You can, as anyone who has ever looked at the back of a, remote for your television can tell you, sometimes they can hold more than one battery.
Yes, that's right.
Hold two.
Yeah,
and I'm being silly, of course. This type of battery, before someone comes at me in the comments, I understand this type of battery is different from the AA in the back of my TV remote.
Right.
But again, we are dealing with things that are scalable. If this is, shown to be effective, we can continue doing more. And battery technology really is one of the biggest things that is a barrier to a lot of the more environmentally sustainable energy generation sources. Because, solar works only when the sun's out, right? And that's not even true either, because we have other types of solar that heat the water and maintain energy that way, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we do have to acknowledge with things like wind and solar, we need to find ways of storing the energy.
That's right.
So whether that's using solar energy to superheat fluids that then retain the heat throughout the night, or if it's a more traditional battery like this. Either way, if we're getting good battery technology, we're doing well.
It's just a good move, right? Like it's like you say about the financial stuff. Like if something is a good move, it's a good move, regardless of whether or not, of all the other stuff. It's just a objectively good thing to do. According to a 2016 census, there was 93,197 private dwellings in Regina. 20,000 homes represents approximately 21% or 1/5 of the total private dwellings in the city. So,
and like they're asked about, like, okay, if it is, they kind of address the point. If it is so scalable, why didn't you just build it bigger? And like, I think they answered fairly politically, saying it makes sense to start small due to operational considerations, which is essentially a way of saying the government won't give us funding. Like, right. This is we need to be perfect in this, or we can't succeed. Right? Like we are existing in a province where if anything is not perfect in this project, the province will use that, or the current provincial government will use that as an excuse to shut her down. So.
Yeah, that's your reason not to do it then.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it didn't scale properly.
No, but it's a good project. I'm excited about it, and hopefully we'll hear more of it as the years move on.
Absolutely. Majority of Sask residents think Premier Moe has done a bad job handling the pandemic, according to a survey. 45% think Moe has done a good job, according to an Angus Reid Institute survey. It's interesting that the headline says majority thinks he did a bad job, and then the subtitle says 45% think he did a good job, like contrasting the views a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's interesting to look at the provincial breakdowns of who, like, where people think there was a good job and bad. It almost seems like there's a left-wing, right-wing dividing line on this.
Yeah, maybe? It's almost how it works.
BC being the outlier. Because in BC, the Liberals are the right-wing party. I would still say that it is a fairly left-leaning province. And again, in BC, they, rated their government fairly strong.
This one's interesting. Like
Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba.
What is going on there? Like, obviously, Kenny didn't do a good job. So what the hell are you thinking? But
one of the things about, like, is interesting in this is, like, the weirdness of how they've got the bars laid out, because it goes good, then very good, then very bad, then bad. Like, it's these charts were designed by someone who doesn't know how charts are supposed to work.
Dear CBC,
they put the extremes in the middle and the neutrals on the outside. Like, if this was on a 1 to 4 scale, you're essentially going with, like, 4 being the best. It goes 3, 4, 1, 2 is how they have it laid out, and the color coding is bizarre. Like, again, I want to talk about the meat of the story rather than just criticize, like, presentation.
Yeah,
this is literally the worst presentation I think I've ever seen of charts in a newspaper or, like, professionally published.
If you're not going to actually have any correlation between, like, accurate description, then just put it in a pie. Just do a pie
something.
chart.
I don't know. It's just bizarre. Sorry, that was my tangent.
Yeah, no, that's
it was just so bad.
But like Manitoba is looking at a bad job. Saskatchewan is majority bad, but there's still a significant portion of the population that think Moe did a good job. Alberta is clearly, most people think that Kenny did an awful job. The one I hear a lot about is Ontario. again, there's 52% say that Ford did a bad job. So,
and Ontario, again, this would be a lot more apparent if the frickin' chart was shaped properly.
Yeah.
Ontario, like, the biggest categories are the two middle ones, which are on the outside.
Right, which are on the outside for some reason.
But, like, you have a lot of people who said good and bad. Very few are saying very good and very bad.
Right.
Like, by very few, again, 21% are still saying very bad. But outside of, like, BC and Atlantic, they have the lowest very bad. So, they've got a lot more bads than Quebec, but less very bads. So, take that as you will. I think Doug Ford, I think, kind of showed what a conservative premier can do when they put politics aside for a bit. And I think he probably backslid a bit, letting politics seep in a bit more near the end. And I think Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba kind of let politics seep in almost
entirely
a lot earlier on.
Yeah. Like
they put politics aside for a couple weeks and then let it seep in right away.
Yeah, like I don't know exactly what happened in Atlantic Canada, and it's all bunched into one thing. So, but
four different governments,
yeah. But as I recall, there was like they were solidly with mandates a lot more than we were, and so just trying to actually give a shit about your citizens is results in them caring.
Yeah, and as far as when restrictions got lifted, pretty much like very, very few people thought restrictions were lifted too slowly.
Right.
There isn't a single part of the country where too slow people thought it was. There were more people who thought it was too slow than there were people who thought it was too quick. Oh, I am a liar. Quebec thought it slightly more thought it was too slow than too quick. But with the majority in Quebec thinking it was done at the right time. So, or plurality, I should say.
Yeah.
You can study these charts for hours and glean all sorts of interesting information, and some of it, is purely conjecture as well. But if anyone's a data nerd, this is some good information to look at. Just
that's right.
Look at the raw data and
maybe
plug
go
your
to
nose
the
when you're looking at the charts.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
However, in spite of the fact that we think our premier did a shitty job with COVID, our next story says...
Yeah, we see his approval rating grow.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre to me.
Yeah.
Climbed to 51% in a poll on the 8th. This was published on the 18th, so the Friday before that. In the fall of 2021, Scott Moe's approval fell to 43%, and in the poll released in January 2022, his approval rating was at 45%, which puts him right in the middle.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Again, it's not a complete shift spectrum politically of left wing to right wing, but you certainly see a lot more left on the left and right on the right in this.
Yeah.
So
it's just the politics of most people in this province are not good. I'm very frustrated by this. They've picked their team and that's that, and they don't read anything. They don't learn anything. It's very frustrating.
That's fair. I don't know what to tell you.
There's not much I could say to it, really. It's just so frustrating.
Since we have come down to two parties, I think you're right. I think as weird as this sounds, I think the death of the Liberal Party on a provincial level probably, I guess it doesn't sound weird, shifting to two parties makes things more polarized. But I think since the death of the Liberal Party, things have definitely gotten a lot more polarized in the province. So there's going to be a chunk of the province either way that has their team and nothing can sway them from it. Yeah, that's right. Because there isn't a third option to go to. I don't know what's beyond that. Like, I would like to think if some of the stuff that has come out about Moe came out about the NDP leader, that would certainly give me pause from supporting the NDP. But again, I don't know if that would be enough to drive me to voting Sask Party. I would maybe start looking a lot more heavily at...
It wouldn't drive me to the Sask Party. But
although one of the things it might also do is drive me to be a lot more active in changing the direction of the NDP at that point, right?
Yeah, maybe.
I have complaints about the NDP at this point, but yeah. I think if we had a leader that had some of the baggage Moe has, and is as remarkably uncharismatic as Moe is at the same time, I would have a hard time supporting the NDP if they had someone like Moe at the helm.
For sure. Sask government resists opposition calls for daily COVID reporting, says the public is not requesting it. And Premier Moe says COVID needs to be managed at an individual level. And again, I think we talked about this last time. I'm not convinced that daily reporting on a public scale is required. We talked in the past about 7-day averages being more in tune with like what we as people need to know. But also, this whole idea that a global pandemic needs to be managed at the fucking individual level is absurd, just nonsense on its face. And I am just disgusted that this is the man who's leading our fucking province. That he says stuff like this. I'm not surprised, but I'm annoyed as hell.
Yep. As I hate the mentality of run governments like a business. That's never been a good philosophy in my mind. There's a lot of problematic elements to it. But like, if you're going to be the party who thinks that, like, what business implements things within their product line that murders people and then says, well, up to our consumers? Like, yeah,
that's right.
Like,
or even
people
like,
are dying.
Yeah.
Like, and they still are, and deaths have gone up.
But I mean, because we don't actually have appropriate like data collection now, like we don't have like we don't even have good reporting on our numbers, so it looks really bad for them as far as I'm concerned.
But like, it's also looking bad from our hospitals are overwhelmed, and we're projecting that we're not going to be able to get a handle on how overwhelmed our hospitals are till 2025. And budgets tend to be optimistic, right? Like 2025 is the optimistic estimate they're giving us at this point for when they think they can get a handle on wait times in the hospital.
Right. Sask provides $1.8 million to schools to help cover COVID-related costs. The Sask Teachers Federation says the extra costs signify the underfunding that was going on already.
Yeah.
Then it gives this awful picture of Dustin Duncan. I'm sure they could have found something that was a little more flattering. That was a bad picture.
It's fair. Yeah. Even we'll give that one to the Sask Party. The biased liberal media putting up the bad picture of him.
That's right. Yeah. Oh wait, this is the Leader Post.
It's a conservative-owned newspaper. Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm being somewhat facetious. They're in it for the views, as you say.
Yeah. So the province announced that was on Monday. That's a week ago. That $1.8 million for school divisions with dollars meant to cover extra employee-related costs. So I guess. Good to have more money going to schools.
Hiring substitute teachers when teachers are sick. Really, that's at the end of the day, that's what this is.
Yeah.
So good, yeah. It's going to make contingency plans easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Considering we're not doing anything to stop any more COVID cases.
And they're blocking the schools from actually taking measures to protect themselves. Yeah. Because we believe in, we hate big government until we're in government, and then we love big government again.
Yeah.
Because again, we keep talking about this for years. I've been talking about this for years. The party of small government and the party of, we don't want, we want things decided at regional levels, and we don't want federal governments telling provinces what to do and provinces telling municipalities what to do. The people at the municipal level understand their own municipalities better. The people in individual schools understand their own schools better. right up until conservatives are in power, and then they're dictating to schools what they need to be doing and not letting principals make decisions for their own schools or school boards make decisions for their own school boards.
Yep.
Ask me how I really feel. So.
Anyways.
Anyways, like, the money is still good. Like, don't get me wrong. Again, doesn't keep pace with inflation. There's still underfunding.
Yep. But
I guess when you're not allowed to eat at the table, the scraps that fall to the ground are at least better than nothing.
At least there's something that you get. Yeah. Moe rejects independent review into handling of COVID-19. The NDP said an inquiry into British Columbia, similar to British Columbia's, would help the province ensure it can learn from its mistakes. Wow. See, that's the thing. Scott Moe doesn't believe he made any mistakes. So he cannot have an inquiry that will talk about his mistakes if he doesn't believe he made any.
And heaven forbid we know what to do better next time.
Well, no. What's better as far as they're concerned is not locking down, not enforcing any mask or mandates of any kind. Just let people die. Yeah.
And again, like, I get governments don't want to open themselves up to criticism.
But again,
this seems to be this weird, again, I've said BC, while they are a liberal government, if I'm not mistaken, the Liberal that has either like very slim majority or a minority propped up by the NDP. I'm not exactly sure how their legislative breakdown comes in, but while the Liberals are a relatively right-wing political party in BC, they have some fairly strong left-wing influences still. It does seem like in Canadian politics, anytime there is even a whiff of a scandal on the left, conservatives demand inquiries every day for years until they get what they want. They just stomp their feet and demand an inquiry, and the left-wing governments go, okay, fine, we'll do an inquiry into this. And whenever you do an inquiry, you're always going to find something wrong. That's like, obviously something has gone wrong that's demanding it, so they get to the root of it. And it's always a huge political disaster for the left-wing party that allows the inquiry to take place.
Of course.
And then right-wing parties, they can fuck up 10 times worse and just say no inquiry is needed, and the left-wing oppositions go, but you gotta, and then nothing ever comes of it. Like,
come on, stomp your feet, let's do it.
And again, I don't know what the solution is, because I don't want the parties that I support acting like temper tantruming toddlers. But at the same time,
I don't know what else they're supposed to do.
We gotta be demanding accountability, and if that's the only way you can get accountability to be implemented, maybe you do need to be a lot more aggressive. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you definitely have to be more aggressive. I just don't know if where you draw that line.
Yeah, fair.
Because they're not aggressive at all.
No.
No. Like, this will be the last time we hear about an inquiry, right?
Yeah, there's a very good chance this will be the last time we hear about it. And, that should be a political win for the NDP, and I don't like the framework of politics being a game.
Right.
But sweet Jesus, you gotta be doing something. Speaking of things that got brought up and then dropped right away.
The article we've been wanting to talk about all night. Pickup truck registered to Saskatchewan Premier, impounded in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Up a little bit. So, I don't know. There's not much to actually say on this particular article. We knew this when we ended last time. Yeah. It turns out it was Premier Moe's son, and Premier Moe, he said that he's not going to talk about it because it's a personal matter. And so this adult human being whose vehicle is plated to our premier doesn't have to face any scrutiny from our province.
And I expect very shortly to hear Scott Moe come out and say that he deeply apologizes to Sophie Gregoire for bringing up stuff that happened with her as a way to get to Justin Trudeau.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Sure.
Because we now have decided that the family members of politicians are exempt from scrutiny.
That's right.
Isn't that what we've decided now? So the family members of Justin Trudeau and Jean Chrétien, they are not one person. They are two separate people. But like all of the scrutiny that Jean Chrétien's family received when he was prime minister, and that was used to sling mud at Chrétien, or Justin Trudeau's family. And of course, I am certain all right-wing politicians who support Scott Moe in his decision not to talk about family will adamantly say they have never brought up Pierre Trudeau as a method of criticizing Justin.
No, of
or
course
apologize deeply if they've done that in the past.
Their deep-seated hatred of Justin is all because of Justin. It has nothing to do with his father.
Yes, they will have now seen the error of their ways.
That's right.
And that father-son relationships should never be exploited for political reasons. And
that's right.
if they've ever criticized Justin for things Pierre did in the past, they will profess their deep apologies for that.
Yes, that's what we'll see.
I will possibly not hold my breath on that because
right.
I like breathing a lot too much.
And it's not as cool when you pass out.
No, that is true. Anyway, like again, we're being silly, but
but there is a real thing here, right? Like like you mentioned it in our messages. That means that his son is in BC doing whatever he's doing, and he's got his vehicle plated for Saskatchewan.
Yeah, so I believe it's for school. So that's sort of what the early articles had said before Moe's son scrubbed all of his social media. It's like the day it happened, when people weren't sure if it was his son or someone else, like that day, Scott Moe's son scrubbed all of his social media, removing any identifiable factors. But my understanding is he's in BC for school, which means when Scott Moe registered that truck, when he ticked off that little box that says, will you be using this school out of the province for greater than X number of days for work or school?
He lied.
When he said no, he lied. So he lied on his insurance. And we've already established, again, with Andrew Scheer, that insurance fraud is okay with conservatives. Saskatchewan conservatives specifically, I guess. That lying about insurance is okay. Not a big 100%, deal. We're not bothered by it.
Nope.
They weren't bothered when Andrew Scheer committed insurance fraud. We're not really bothered if Scott Moe's committing insurance fraud. And like, to be fair, this is the type of thing that, like, the insurance fraud piece of it is the type of thing that my guess is a fine. Like, we're not dealing with running through a stop sign and killing someone like he's done in the past. Yeah. That's a bigger deal.
It might be the kind of thing that would make your insurance not pay out if you were in an accident of some kind.
Yeah.
Like I could see
we'll
that.
See if that ends up happening, yeah. But regardless, like, I think I'm torn on whether there's a story here or not. Like, I think we need to just be aware of the consistency issue. And it's tough because as much as we talk about conservatives as a whole, they are not a monolith. So I'm sure there are some conservatives who didn't bring up the family of left-wing politicians who are now the ones saying this is a non-story. And I'm sure there are conservatives who are upset by what happened and were upset at the behaviors of the family members of left-wing politicians too. Like, I'm sure there are conservatives who are consistently either this isn't a story or it was a story in the past and is a story now. Yeah, I am guessing there's a pretty large swath, though, that are not think that this is a non-story. We shouldn't worry about it. While at the same time, if the same thing were to have happened to Justin Trudeau, they would be calling for his resignation.
There might be and I was talking to our next episode's guest. I was talking to her earlier today, and we were discussing the culture of drinking and driving that is in Saskatchewan. Like this clearly plays a big role in the dismissal in some cases of it not being that big of a deal, or even with Scott Moe's situation, like where he had a history of drinking and driving, and we don't know if he was drunk, but he did have an accident that killed somebody, but this is all lumped together within the Saskatchewan culture that accepts and almost encourages drinking and driving in many cases.
Yeah. Like, talked about, I think it was 2020. It was around, I think it was 10% of Sask Party MLAs had drinking and driving convictions. Not just charges, not just arrests, but like convictions.
Yeah.
So 10% of the party has drunk driving convictions.
Yeah.
We've had Sask Party, I believe, public safety ministers who have drunk driving convictions. So like ministers literally in charge of making sure people don't drink and drive themselves were past drunk drivers. Again, Moe has one conviction, another arrest, charged with fleeing the scene of a crime after a drunk driving accident.
Yep.
Plus, again, killing someone while driving with undue care and attention, with no evidence that alcohol was involved in that one of the 3 driving issues he's had. But you're right, it's a cultural thing. And I remember at a family gathering with my in-laws' family. I think I even talked about this on the show before, but I was at a family gathering at an in-laws out grid roads and whatnot, and they were all talking about what grid roads to take to avoid the cops when you're drinking.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the cousins talking about how to get away with it if you do get in an accident. Like if you get in an accident while drinking, and I'm not going to go into what he said, but it was pretty deplorable. But here's how to get away with it if you accidentally get in an accident while you're drinking and driving. And it was just normal. And to the extent where, I'm not a light drinker. I enjoy drinking. But if I was drinking, I would say, no, I can't drive, or vice versa. If I drove to where we were, I would say, no, I can't drink tonight. And that would just be shocking. That was almost insulting to my hosts that I wouldn't drink and drive, that I wouldn't accept their alcohol just because of some silly reason like driving home after.
That's how culturally ingrained drinking and driving is in Saskatchewan.
Again, that said, I think this is an issue that, even if not this specific one, and again, I'm torn. I don't think, again, if it was reversed, if Justin Trudeau had a 28-year-old adult child who had been caught drinking and driving, we would hear every day from John Gormley, if he can't be a good enough father, why should he be prime minister, right? We would his ability to be a father would be called into question over this, and there would be demands for his resignation over this.
And you and I would be critical of Justin Trudeau and this behavior. That's
I think we would.
We might not call for his resignation. I'm not necessarily calling for Scott Moe's resignation. I think it's okay to be critical and expect accountability on some levels without, and just to be honest about hey, drinking and driving isn't cool. Don't encourage people to do it.
Yeah. But again, this has been the Scott Moe approach. Yeah. Every time stuff like this comes up, he basically says, no, I don't want to talk about it. And the media goes, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess we won't talk about it then. Whether it was his own past, whether it's now with his son, whether it's about MLAs with drinking and driving, every time the topic of drinking and driving or accidents involving driving or reckless driving, anytime some of this comes up, he just says, no, I don't think this is important to talk about, and the media just seems to listen, and it's bizarre to me. As a whole, it represents a pattern of behavior and philosophy and attitude. Yep. And that pattern should be addressed in some way or another, even if this one incident in and of itself wouldn't. Right. It makes me a little icky to go after politicians' families. Right. Even if they're adults. All right.
You can find us at anchor.fm/frommanypeoples. Our Twitter is at skpoliticspod. Our Facebook is facebook.com/frommanypeoplesstrengthpod. And you can send us an email at frommanypeoples@gmail.com. And finally, you can support the show at buymeacoffee.com/frommanypeoples. That's it.
Thank you. All right. Well, and again, for those who are hearing this episode and are excited about future ones, I think both of our next 2 episodes are going to have guests. So stay tuned.
Yeah, we have Sarah Burrell from the podcast Unmaking Saskatchewan, and Steve Boots from TikTok fame and Boots on the Ground podcast.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Cory, for getting us cool guests to talk to, for doing audio stuff, for trying to figure out why I've had a hum on my microphone the last few episodes and fixing the technology. We'll put in so much work. We'll get it figured out. You put so much work in, and I just get to show up and talk for a bit. So I really appreciate everything you do.
Well, it's a lot of fun. So,
all right.
Thanks.
Take care.
We can move on away from the budget. I guess I was going to mention quick too, actually. Like, I prefer the NDP over the SS party, obviously. I'm not a big electoralism fan. I think that often it falls short of what we need in society. But some of the critics from the NDP were very good on the budget. But I also didn't really, I don't know, maybe I'm being harsh, but I thought Trent Witherspoon was attacking the wrong things and didn't do a very good job criticizing the budget.
Yeah.
So I thought I should throw that out there.
Yeah, no, I like, that's been a pretty consistent complaint I've had about many of the mediocre NDP MLAs. Like, it very out of touch with some of the things that they should be attacking.
Yeah.
Again, this wasn't this time, but one of the things I remember from like a few budgets ago is the boogeyman of the crown corporations. That seems to be one of the things that our NDP MLAs seem obsessed with, and the loss of crown jobs or the privatizing of crown corporations, which again, I'm not in most
we don't want
case,
them privatized.
In most cases, like I still think this is why I guess I get called a dirty centrist by some of our left-wing folks, is I still don't think government should be running liquor stores. And I don't know how out of tune I am with
I don't know,
other people in this province on that topic. But again, that's the type of thing you hear the NDP obsessed with, that we need to keep liquor stores run by the government. And I get those are good government jobs, and you want to keep good government jobs instead of turning them into dirty retail jobs. But at the same time, like, pick something else. I don't know. Like, we wouldn't say, oh, we need to have our government run 7-Elevens because we want those to be government wage jobs, right? So
yeah, and we never started with weed. Like, it never became weed government stores, right?
No.
Like,
and those could have been good government jobs too. But again, we understand that, like, in a blended economy, some things are probably better run by the private sector. I don't know. I'd far rather have internet service be run by the government than liquor stores. I think that seems like liquor stores still feel like a thing that's retail. Like, that's still... Sorry, I'm off topic, but my idea again, it says the Trent Witherspoons of the NDP seem to be obsessed with... I think the ideas that used to be... I don't know, ageist. I don't know. I think they're obsessed with ideas that used to be really, really important to voters 50 years ago. I think they're still trying to be the NDP of the 60s and 70s. I don't think you can win an election in 2020 by being the NDP of 1970.
No. Well, I mean, and obviously you can't.
I guess because they haven't. Right. So I'd like to...
Whatever they're doing, it's not working. All right.